Okay, hello and welcome everybody. It's good to see you guys on this chilly February. This is the Helen M. Salzberg 2026 Visiting Artist Talk, and our visiting artist is Diane Arrieta. I'm going to introduce her, but first I want to introduce a few people in the room. If anybody's in the room from our department, well, I see one professor, art history professor, Cara Tomei. Who else is here? Is anybody? Oh, I think we have our ceramics professor, Michael Blair, over there. I am Jacques de Beaufort. I'm the chair of the art department. I also teach painting, drawing, and sometimes art history. So let me just tell you a little bit about the Helen M. Salzberg Center for the Arts and our patron, who is Helen M. Salzberg, who is an artist and philanthropist. She's 102 years old. She lives over in Palm Beach Island. We actually just had a show of her work that some of you may remember a few months ago, which was fantastic. And she's made these talks in Visiting Artists possible. So we thank her. Now, before I introduce the artist, we do have another program that runs concurrently to the Visiting Artist, and this is our fourth Visiting Artist, by the way. We have a mentee program, and it's called the Koo Family Art Collaborative. So we select 2 or 3 mentees every year. And let me introduce you to our mentees this year. So if you guys could stand when I call your name, and I'll just say a little bit about you. Our first one is Caitlin Allen. Caitlin is an art historian and practicing photographer. She's returned to academic study to deepen her fine art photography practice. With a focus on analog and digital processes, she seeks to explore the intersection of concept and craft. Alan views this mentorship as an opportunity to strengthen her technical foundation and refine her creative direction towards a professional career in the arts. Thank you. Our other mentee this year is Camila Diaz. Camila is an art education student. She's passionate about both creating and teaching art. Her work spans photography and mixed media, reflecting themes of identity, emotion, and personal growth. Through the mentorship, she aims to continue evolving her artistic voice while preparing for a future career as an art educator and practicing artist. So as part of the program, the mentees will work alongside our visiting artist, Diane, during the spring semester. They will assist Diane with her solo exhibition, an art workshop, which I will talk about before the end of the presentation. Participate in studio visits with local artists, engage with curators, and develop personal projects under her guidance. So, our visiting artist, Diane Arrieta, 2026. Diane Arrieta is an interdisciplinary visual artist whose practice bridges environmental science, feminist materiality, and cultural memory. Working across ceramics, fiber, and installation, she creates immersive sculptural environments that translate ecological data into emotional, empathetic experience. Drawing on her background in wildlife and ecosystems health, Arrieta approaches art making as a form of ecological listening, using nesting structures, constructed habitats, and ritual-inspired forms to reflect themes of vulnerability, resilience, and regeneration. Arrieta holds a BFA in ceramic sculpture and an MSc in wildlife health from the University of Edinburgh. Her work has been exhibited widely in the United States and the United Kingdom and is held in the programming of major museums and cultural institutions. She's a recipient of numerous fellowships and awards and is the founding director of the International Humanities Project Curatorial Lab. Please give her a round of applause. Thank you.
Hey, everyone, thanks for coming. It's going to take me a few minutes to not be shaky, so bear with me. Thanks, Jacques, for this opportunity and the solo show. So this is the first time I'm going to talk about my whole body of work from where I think I found my artistic voice to now, and then what direction I'm going in. my work is basically about stewardship and care of animals in the environment. Um, since I've been little, I've always felt any animal that I see is under my care. And just so all my friends know that I um, calculate in my brain how you guys relate to me based on this job that I had as a sea lion trainer, and nobody ever lives up. I'm sorry. Sea lions are great. So I've just always had dual careers of art and science. And then back in 2012, I decided to merge the two and get the science degree so I knew what I was talking about, so it would inform my practice. And here are some of my former coworkers. Um, so I've always been, it's hard to explain what I'm thinking about in my work, but I didn't have the language or the understanding of why I was making art or exactly what the purpose of it was until I started working with the animals again. And that's the art and that's the artist. I taught the deers how to paint. So I never really left art, but when I'm doing wildlife, it becomes obsessive and I don't really make art. And I finally come to a place where I can do both. This wasn't my art, but they're better painters than I am. And I've never spoken out loud who my biggest influence to my work is. And this is Daisy Youngblood. She gets to the essence. She had her art makes you feel. It doesn't make you have to really think about it. You feel a presence and they feel like they've always been here, that she didn't create them. They were just found or they've existed. Um, it's just what I'm trying to do with my work is find the essence of what I'm trying to say, because the concepts that I work with are extremely complicated and the environment is a conceptual idea, ecosystems and everything. You have to understand difficult concepts that are very hard to boil down into one topic. So he already kind of said what all my work is about. Um, I started off with, this was the first piece that I feel like I started to find my voice, both science and art-wise. And it's talking about the Florida black bear. I was doing a research project trying to stop the Florida hunt of the black bear. And so it's called My Kingdom Ain't So Magic. And it's because Disney was the first guy to figure out how to fill in the Everglades. And then it was all downhill from there. And I've come to the concept of wonderment in my work at this point because of all the gloom and doom. People don't really want to learn about the environment through, we're all going to die, which I tend to be always the doom person in the room. So I figured out that if they're happy and they're looking at fun characters in the work, then they don't really think that you're going to start talking about difficult concepts. But once you get in there, then I start with the science, and then they're like, this, stop talking to me. It's too much to talk about. But the work allows an in so that you're not afraid to talk about these topics. This was my solo show in Miami, and this is where feminism started to creep into the work along with environmental, because women bear the largest brunt of environmental disaster, and they are the stewards of the earth because the men, especially in underdeveloped countries, go out and work in the cities and leave the women there to do all the work. So these are patron saints, and each animal that they were charged with taking care of. So then there's the Hawaiian crow, and the bear again shows up and is just talking about, at this point in my work, it's science communication. I want you to learn why you're looking at the work. It can just be cute and all of that, but if you take the time to really sit, wonder asks you to slow down and it asks you to look again and it asks you to imagine a world that doesn't exist, or how we can make our world better again, both for the animals and for um, ourselves. So this is part of the same show. It's talking about bird migration and how the birds and everything is out of sync, so they can't find homes, they can't find food. And I'm using it on top of a woman because we are the ones exasperating climate change, and all of these changes are man-made mostly. And so this Heckle and Jekyll video is a funny cartoon where they can't find a home. And if you're all too young to even know who Heckle and Jekyll is, but they're really funny cartoons that talk about things that people don't really know that it's talking about. And the deer has a key around his neck because the deer symbolizes ecosystems, and the ecosystems hold the key to human health. If we would just let them regenerate and be healthy, then we wouldn't be in quite this mess. And these two pieces are kind of self-portraits, the forest princess, and you can tell that's me because I have a crown and I have on big socks because I'm always freezing. So she's in the forest with her friend, protecting all her little wildlife friends. And then the other one is talking about climate change, and in society, meerkats are sentinels. So they stand charge and make calls to alert all of the animals in the system around them. But in this case, they're all floating off because of rising waters and all the natural disasters that the child now has to become the caretaker. And so she's holding on as they're trying to float by and get on with life. Um, and you'll see those inner tubes when we go in the gallery. They migrate through my work throughout the last 10 years because we're all just trying to hold on and get by while we're all kind of drowning in our own stuff that we have. And then this kind of marks the last two works of the wonderment phase. I started to feel heavier in my personal life. Things were changing. I had a bunch of crappy stuff happen a couple years ago, and the work seemed, instead of being a character that people see them as characters, my work started changing, that the animals are still there, but they started to have more presence and carry weight instead of being these cute characters. And the Yeti is talking about climate change, and this yellow girl is, you can see, again, you guys don't know Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, rabbit season, duck season. It's a play on that, but it's also a metaphor for society beating on women and trying to control everything we do. And every time we get up, we get knocked down. And so it was just a funny way to talk about that. So my materials started to change. I wanted more earth tones that held labor and understanding of care. Burlap specifically is agricultural. It carries food. It's biodegradable. It carries the history of the agricultural and our ancestors. So I wasn't interested in softness or making light of the subjects. I was more turning inward, excuse me. I was interested in endurance. And so the feminism, after the crazy couple years I had like 2 years of full on feminist, and the work doesn't really scream feminist, but you can't really see, there's a woman carrying water in the burlap sacks, and it's talking about agriculture and all the labor and how agriculture is destroying pastoral lands and taking over the animal migration patterns, specifically the wildebeest. The migrations are collapsing. So they're getting less and less able to function as they normally do throughout history. And wildebeests are one of my favorite animals. So I'm letting the animals now carry the weight without having to do the job of entertaining the viewer, because thought it was my job to get you in there and learning, but now that I'm putting that responsibility back to the viewer, like it's your responsibility to look and think and understand artwork. And if you don't, that's fine, but if you do, you're going to learn tons more about yourself and society in general. So I felt my work had a natural progression. And these were the feminist years, talking about Aphrodite and the long braids and how society dictates aging women's hair. Everybody has to cut their hair and everybody has to be skinny. And this round ball is taking up space. She's chubby and she has long hair and she's unapologetic about it. And also, when I was making this, I remembered that my Czechoslovakian grandmother had hair down to the floor. She wore it up in a bun. So I did research, and apparently Slovak women, if you're married, they never are allowed to cut their hair. And if you're married, they have to have it in one bun. And if you're single, you have to have pigtails or two buns. And I thought that was interesting because I remember being little thinking, why does she have all that hair? And now I know that it's cultural and patriarchal, and I don't like it. But I like this piece because it gives itself agency to be who she wants to be. And the other piece beside it, which you'll see when we go next door, they're hybrid animals, and it's talking about matriarchal societies and all the lessons that animals have learned that we're not listening to. Just how they run their societies is pretty functional, and how we run ours. Ours is extractive, and theirs is in tune with nature. So it's something that we need to study more. So this realization pushed my work to another direction. Systems of inherited responsibility. And my heritage, this piece was for a museum show about heritage, and I have both native and colonizer heritage. So it's my responsibility to figure out how to live with both of those sides of my heritage. And this piece is talking about the boarding schools and how they just stole all the native children and put them in schools and stripped them of their identity. You can see the long braid, they cut off all their hair. They weren't allowed to be native at all. They were trying to whitewash them into being good little Christian soldiers. So there's native and religious iconography here mixed. The saint with her arm out is Saint Tekakwitha. She ends up in my work a lot. She's the first Native American patron saint in the Catholic religion. And she was a patron saint of the environment. But if you really look at her history, she had the choice of marrying when she was 10 or 13 or joining the church. So she chose the church over marrying a man and doing all the labor that entails. So it's a dichotomy of what is happening in society. And I'm not going to get into the whole religion thing. That's for you to decide. But for my own purposes, I'm on the native side of that argument. And that crow is my symbol, while the bear is a clan of the tribes from the Northeast Pennsylvania. So it's a mixture of me, my ancestors, my religion, because I grew up Catholic, but what they did is hard to resolve in my mind. So I'm starting to make artwork, and I feel that it's my responsibility. Whoever has these heritage, it's your responsibility to learn and hold the tension between generations and see how we can move forward to kind of right those wrongs. the material stayed heavy, the burlap, and I tend to get very conceptual, and the more conceptual my work gets, the very smaller my audience gets. And this particular piece, I think, sums up the last 10 years of my career the best, but nobody gets it, which is fine. But it's talking about I can't think of the word right now, the abuse of the environment and just agricultural rupture of land and ecosystems and how it's commodified, but it still holds sustenance. So there's always a good and a bad side with my work. And I just think it's really cool looking. But, I don't think a lot of people understand the deep meaning behind agriculture and land change. And most of my work is trying to figure out how to get that out there about human health and everything being linked, because people have spotty ideas of how the environment works. So the animals were coming back, but this time they're raw. They're not so cute. They're messy, and burlap is still asking you to hold what has happened because of agriculture and palm oil. The orangutans are critically endangered. So this is an echo of what the orangutans used to be. And there's very few left in the wild, and they're all in refuges and stuff because we can't stop consuming products with palm oil. So it's super annoying, but I'd still like to give the animals the diligence and the reverence that they need. So, sorry, I keep saying a lot. This piece, it's pretty much the last piece I've made this year, except for the crow piece that I'll talk about. It's talking about, first of all, bears are kins in Native American. They're related to people according to Native American mythology, and they're considered medicine people. So whoever has a bear clan, they were in charge of healing the tribes. And I just think that he's the epitome of regeneration. Bears are a symbol of hope because they hibernate and they come back new every year. So this piece, he's coming out of hibernation and starting to grow again. And the wheelbarrow symbolizes labor that it takes for us to rebuild and help the animals. So it carries the weight of what we have to do to make the environment function the way it should. And as I was doing this, before we get to the nest, back to my crappy couple years, I read this book. If anyone needs a book to read, Grief is a Thing with Feathers was like one of the best books I've ever read. And not everyone will get it, but at the time I needed it because it was talking about grief. And his grief in the book was about death, but my grief was loss of friendships and jobs and people that I thought had my back, and nobody came when I was really down and I had to dig myself out. And crows are a symbolism for me of the human spirit, and they take you between two worlds. And I felt like I was on the edge a lot, but crows show up. And in this piece, the crows in the background are the bullies, and they're behind me causing all kinds of havoc. And I'm the one in the front with the crown. And when you go over there, you'll see it's a picture of me when I was 5. When I was a little kid, I was bullied. And then it happened again when I was an adult. And it was a lot harder when I was adult, surprisingly, because kids don't know what's going on. Something doesn't feel right, but when it happens to you when you're an adult, it can really knock you for a loop. And the crows just sit with you and help you go through your own stuff. People, it's called Murder of One because I felt like the people that were supposed to be friends murdered me. And then I asked for help and nobody came. So I did it myself. I became the crow and I got myself out of that. And here we are today. So, which leads into my body of work. Um, that's the main body of work in the galleries are nests, and birds are the most important indicators of how the environment runs and how it's doing, and they're not doing well. So it's the first indicator that we need to pay attention. So I got to thinking about the architecture of birds and how every year they build a nest and they show up and they're there for their families. And that's what we have to do for ourselves. You have to take care of yourself and you have to build your inner home and your outer home. So even though you know that it might not last, their houses don't always last. They have to come back and build it again. So in my mind, that's what I was doing. I was rebuilding from the ground up. So each nest is a ritual on just meditating and rebuilding myself, but also giving reverence to the incredible things that birds do. So these two were forage nests, and my sister sent me like 8 forage nests from Pennsylvania. So this is about building community. And the funniest thing happened when I was making this, all of a sudden people that hadn't talked to me for years started sending me pictures of nests and where I can find nests. And so I was building back a community that went away and they came back. So um, the first one was foraged in my backyard. The other one is from Pennsylvania. And then they're just altered a little bit so they stay up to hang on the wall. And these are some of the first two are ones I invented in my mind. And then the second one is a mixture of man-made and bird-made. So when I got to thinking the work is not primarily about representation anymore, it's about relationships, human, animal, materiality, and memory. Nests hold memory and they share community. They ask you to slow down, they ask you to pay attention. So this work brought me back to my studio, um, but with a different view of the artwork. It's still mixing man-made and industrial and found objects, and this nest is the last thing that I built, and I had my friend Dana and Caitlin help me put this piece up. It was a really fun day, but for me, it's a metaphor of how society is running right now. Everyone is just floating and trying to hang on, and it's all the debris. And there's family pictures from my childhood up until now. So everything from your childhood through adulthood you carry with you. And some goes off and some sticks, and you have to figure out how to navigate this swirling mess that society is sometimes. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but everything has to come together and you have to care for yourself and for others. And it's the labor, like this is labor intensive and living is just labor intensive. So in a sense, my work has come full circle. Wonderment with animals, labor and feminism, stewardship, turning into ritual objects that hold memory and heritage. So I probably talked way too fast than I had planned because I didn't read one single thing off of these 25 pages. I've made it all up. So um, I don't know if I covered everything, but what's happening now is that I've got to a point where I'm so minimal, I don't even want to make things anymore. I'm going to go back to the wheel, but I'm treating the wheel as a sense of place, and the vessels are like the inner being, and then the colors are, I want the work to be like a landscape where you feel you're in the presence of nature, not necessarily view them as pottery. So I'm just going to take 6 months to a year to relearn the wheel because I haven't done it for 20 years, um, and see how that goes. I'm going to be engineering and calculating my own glazes to get a color palette that matches all of my sculptural work. So eventually they're going to merge, but I feel like I need to take the time to meditate and relax and learn the craft again and see where that leads towards my installation. So stay tuned. That's about it. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay.
I was just gonna ask, like, is there any specific meaning behind the yellow dots that are like all
Oh,
over?
good question, because I usually talk about that, but I forgot because I'm panicked. Yellow dots, I've been using the yellow circles for like 15 years in my work, and it just represents unity and recycling and nature as a whole. And plus the yellow is caution, but it's also hope. So for 10 years, my work was all yellow. And then I started incorporating the pinks, but now it's all the colors more muted. But thank you. That was a good, I forgot about that.
Do you have any plans for the ceramics you're gonna make in the upcoming year?
For what? The ceramics?
Like, do you have a like, do you have any? What's the?
Like what shapes and stuff?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to focus first on bottle shapes just because they're beautiful, and of course the hardest thing to throw, and bowls because I like to eat out of the bowls that I make, and it signifies sharing and community when you give someone a ceramic bowl. But the bottles represent holding things, but they're still open so things can come and go. And I just love the shape of a bottle, nicely thrown bottle form.
Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, Professor?
Okay, can you go, because you did go so fast.
I know.
Could you go back though, because I don't know if everyone really understood, and I'd like you to describe, because I've never really heard a full description of how you got those animals to make paintings.
Oh,
And yeah, just that relationship with animals and how you turned them into the artists and how that all happened. And then the second question is, why is the wildebeest your favorite animal?
okay. Um, so part of your job as a zookeeper is to enrichment for the animals. And we didn't really, at this particular job, there wasn't really much in the way of enrichment besides I would put apples on trees and stuff. And I know that people paint with animals, so I just built a brush that they could manipulate and put peanut butter, not peanut butter for the, I can't remember what food I used as a motivator, but if you use food to teach a behavior, they eventually learn it. And I was in control of the colors, of course, but they moved the brush around. And then I would take that and get another brush and they would move it around. And only like a week. And I also taught that this little, the little bird to play tic-tac-toe. I built a tic-tac-toe with little squares, and he would come. You can see he's sitting on my boots every morning after I would clean the enclosure. We would play tic-tac-toe, and I put crickets in there, and he would pick the thing, and would, X and O's he would pick, and then he always beat me. So
Okay, so can you talk more about your relationship with science and animals in terms of like, so when I was a zookeeper, I'm sure a lot of us like, what, you're a zookeeper? So I know you worked in various centers and things. Can you talk a little bit about that work? That's
I started off as a sea lion keeper down in Miami. Best job ever. I've hated every job since, except for these ones. The ones that involve people, not so much my favorite. So yeah, I got to. It was at the feeder pool. People would come and feed, and I'd give a talk about the sea lions. And then during the show, I would bring the harbor seal out. We'd walk out. He would wave, and then we'd walk back in. It was just the best job ever. Ethically, I couldn't work there now, but it was just amazing. And then from there, this antelope place is here, right here in Loxahatchee, Florida. It's a private place, and that he's the man that runs it. Dr. Riello is the reason I went and got my degree, because he's the first person to taught me about biodiversity and hotspots and how important the environment is. And they fund, they buy up land and fund national parks in diversity hotspots, and they have flagship species like these bongos, and they breed them and repatriate them back to Kenya, and all of their animals are in a reserve, but the goal is eventually to let them back out into the wild. And they also have primates, small primates from Brazil, and the most endangered parrots on the planet from Dominica. And they built a big park in Dominica, and they have trained all their biologists to now captive breed the birds to be put back. And then I was a dolphin biologist for a year and a half, out on a boat counting dolphin fins and coming back and cataloging to see who's who. There's about 300 wild dolphins off the coast of Palm Beach County. And there's a group of scientists at Taurus Oceanographic that track and monitor these animals. They go out once a week or twice a week. And that was the best job ever also. And then from there, it's bush wildlife, where I've never worked with local wildlife. So it was a good learning experience to work with our local wildlife and see what was out there and how they're affected by everything in the environment. So that was, and once I got my science degree, my art career took off more, which I guess it grounded my work in something passionate that I loved, and people started wanting my work more than they did me as a scientist. So at this point, I put so much into the art that I'm using the science more to just inform my work.
Did you have
Laura, did you
a
have?
question? Yeah.
So I'm always amazed when I meet artists and see what they've produced. And my question is, what is your process? Like kind of from concept to finish work. I mean, I know they're all different. I'm sure, I don't know if they're commissioned or even when they're not commissioned, like, do you spend time every day, certain amount of time, like
That's a good
thinking,
question.
using, creating, would just love to know more.
Every artist works differently. I personally am research-based. I will read 500 science papers on just, if I see something on TV, an animal, I'm like, oh, let me read about that. And I'll start researching and reading and reading and reading. And then sometimes the work takes 5 years to become a piece of work, because I'm trying to figure out what and how is the best way to get whatever message I'm thinking about. But as far as like what medium I use, it just depends on what the piece is and what it's talking about that would best get that idea across. So I know some other artists just they have like a blanket idea and then they just make. I have never been that artist. I have to, and this might be throwback to, I went to grad school for art for a year, and the teacher there was like, you have to think of every single thing and blah, blah, blah. They ruined my art honestly, I couldn't make art for 5 or 6 years after that 1 year of grad school, so I left because it wasn't doing its job for me. It was the wrong school. But I've always been obsessive about has to be this and has to be that, and I'm getting more away from that. I'm done teaching. I'm more into creating a space to belong in, and whatever feeling you get or whatever you learn from it, there is still always going to be a science message, but I'm not, oh, you got to learn this. I want you to feel it. And when you feel part of nature, hopefully that'll motivate you to act on it. So thank you. That was a good one.
Well, I guess I have a question, Diane, well, observation as well. When Diane was putting the piece up, there was a lot of the work is made of leaves and bark and things like that. So after she put the big nest piece up, there was just all this, what I was thinking was trash on the ground. And she started sweeping it up. And I said, Diane, I'm going to go get you a trash can so you can throw this away. And she said, no, don't throw it away. This is part of the art. And so then she put it in the box in next to the nest piece, which I thought was interesting. But I think that big nest piece in particular, one on the column, a lot of my students have really been responding to it, and I'm responding to it too, because there's so many things in it that seem to have significance. The life raft, I know there's like a little bird cage in there. There's some personal photos. There's all kinds of stuff. And so I think that piece in particular is very resonant. And I wonder if you wanted to comment on that piece and maybe some of the items in it that were significant.
Yep. Oh, because they're goofy. They're just goofy looking. But I like hoofstock are my favorite animals to work with. And I've just read a lot about, and one of the senior scientists at there's a wildebeest. One of the senior scientists was an expert, and I've read all his books. And it's just the migration of the wildebeest has always fascinated me. This, yeah, the one on the, not the zebra. um,
This is
no, that's a
wild boar.
warthog. That's a warthog. And the reason I did a warthog is they're on the edge. They're on the edge. They have a lot of human interaction, so they're on the edge of agriculture and wild places. So it was a good way to show that um, wildlife and human animal conflict is a big problem, especially in Africa. And another anecdotal, when I went to grad school, the first assignment we had to write about something about elephants. And I was stupid American, like, oh, the majestic elephant, blah, 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 blah. And one of the students who was a working vet was like, my father was trampled by an elephant. They're pests. And I'm like, wow, that just shows the perspective of wildlife throughout the world and the difficulties there are in saving it.
But you were going to go to the nest piece before Kara hijacked the question.
There you go. So what am I supposed to be doing? So it's just foraged branches and leaves, and then the inner tubes show up throughout my work just as a metaphor. Um, the circles about the circle of life, and the nest is in a circle. There's pictures from my childhood and pictures from pretty recent crumpled up in there, um, which you can take that to mean either thing, like it's been a rough life or I'm done with that and I've moved on. Um, and the bird's cage is a perfect example of urban man-made things versus the haphazard nests of nature. Even though they're great architects, I keep finding, I think I'm finding squirrel nests now in my yard. Every time I go home and there's a bunch of palm fronds, and then when it gets windy, this big cool thing ends up in my yard. So now I'm collecting squirrel habitats. So not only birds use nests, other animals make structures. So this piece is talking about all the different structures and what it feels to be home. And
Do you feel like it could be a self-portrait?
right now, yes, a mess. Of the past 5 years, yes, but I'm more coming out of that mess. I've hung on, and now I'm starting to come out into like the nests on the back wall, like structured, and finding my way back to sanity after that whirlwind of a mess. It's a metaphor for society for sure right now because it's a mess, I think.
Any other questions? Hold on.
This is less of a question, but more something that I really enjoyed about your work is all the kind of kid related toys that I see here and there. You see like Dory is on the other side of that, and then some other like kids like plushies. And I know like you said earlier, it was about trying to like lighten the mood in a sense so people take the information better. But I also was thinking when I was walking around your exhibit earlier, I was like, wow, it's like think about the kids, think about what we're doing, think about everything. And I really just love
Exactly.
it.
Yeah,
I
thank
love
you.
your work.
Also, I forgot to, as part of the animation philosophy and wonderment, transitional objects are go through when you're a child, their security, when you're an adult, they're nostalgic. And so that's always a part of my work, but always women and children take the brunt of all of this. So um, I tend to focus on those figures and those toys just to remind everyone that children have it the hardest. Thank you.
Anybody else? Nope.
Honestly, if I'm while listening to you, it actually is really cool how you can make all kinds of art like express 1,000 words by just looking at it and perceiving like how it's made, how it's like, compiled, formatted into such a, beautiful piece of like, just material. And I like how you designed it and how much work was actually put into it because, art can take years, months to make. And a lot of art is just, it can be worth thousands, but spiritually too.
Yeah, some people can take 5 years to make a painting, and some people can make a piece of art in 10 minutes. But for me, it's the emotion that you get from the piece, like the history of, because like I said, it takes me sometimes 10 years before a piece, like that crow piece has been in there for a while, but it just came out at the right time. And there's a time and place for every object that you make. And for me, when I look at artwork, if I don't like too much realism in artwork because I get bored. I can appreciate the talent and the time, but it doesn't hold my interest because I can't find a story. But if there's like little imperfections and stories that I don't understand, it makes me wonder what it could be or invent stories. And that's what art, in my opinion, should be reflective of the person looking at it, not the person making it.
I have another statement to make. Um, I really like the use of circles in your piece because it really reminds me of this video I just recently watched of the Lakota people in the Pine Ridge Reservation. And the shaman talks about how the circle represents the bottom of a teepee. And that circle is like part of the like really strong belief of like continuity and unity. And I can't really like name all of it, but it was really interesting. And after I saw that video, it kind of made everything make a little like kind of connected a
That's
lot of
great. Thank
dots.
you. I used to read a lot about shamanism. it's one of my topics of interest.
Yeah, it was really. I learned about like the Juanetta, or like he's a very famous like Native American that was like a staple for. He was like, the main defense when they were trying to do the whole assimilation thing of. But yeah, I really appreciate it. It was nice.
You said you have native ancestors, but could you be a little bit more specific about how you found out and where they're from?
I'm originally from Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, and um, originally we thought we were Susquehannock, which were the people in my grandparents. Both of my grandparents had farms, but my mother's family lived on the Susquehanna River, literally, and there was a big native village there. Um, but the timeline doesn't match the Susquehanna because they were extinct. So after a year of research, we've come to decide that they're Lenape. And this was before they started doing all the native enrollment. So we only have oral history. And one of my cousins lived with my great grandfather. He's the one that had all the stories. And I didn't know about this. When I was 5 years old, they took me to an Indian village in Niagara Falls. And I wanted to stay there. I cried. I wanted to leave. And everyone's like, shut up, we're going home. And I never understood that until I was 40. I had an aunt that said, oh, well, you are Native. And I'm like, what? Like, why does my family care about this? And nobody cared. And then she sadly passed away. But I recently found a cousin that has all the good stories because he lived with the great grandfather. So they've all done their research, and I did all my research, and Lenape were the Indians living right on my grandfather's land that we colonized and took from them. I would like to mention that again.
So with all the circles and everything, and you said everything comes like full circle. It's like circle of life and such like that. When you look at your artwork, say like your nest, if you look at it from even a week later, are there things that you want to put into it or take out of it? Do you want to modify it, or do you leave it as it is?
This piece, if I show this again, it'll be completely different. But as I was at home, I'm like, oh, I should add this. Oh, I should add that, because it would just make it more and more. But I decided to leave it alone. But the small nests, no, they're pretty static into themselves. But all of my installations are not. Every time it gets shown, it's just a little bit different. And if you put it up somewhere and you listen to all the feedback and you're looking at it in a certain space, and each space dictates the mood of a piece. Like the crow piece was just in a show that Kara did, The Warehouse. Most amazing show. The crow piece looked 1,000 times better in that space. It was moody. It had lighting. So over here, it's too bright and it doesn't have the same mood. Has the same feeling, but not emotional as it did in that space. So each installation piece gets tweaked forever. But this nest in particular, I was wanting to add more, but I didn't. It certainly could be added to, but I would like to do a whole room full of a built nest like that. That would be cool.
If you remember one of my classes when we were talking to you, we got the opportunity to talk to you. And one of my students said something really, really sharp, I thought. We were looking at one of the nest pieces, and I guess it was the one that has the little motion sensor light on it.
Yeah.
So you have the animal kind of coming in and colonizing the human-made world. And he observed that the bird doesn't really care whether it's a natural or human-made material that they'll use. And they don't see the distinction necessarily between the two. And I think that also had something to do with your animistic work too. The permeability and the artificial distinction perhaps between the human and the animal-made world. And that is elicited, I think, by the nest pieces.
Yeah, that was a good observation. Like crows collect all kinds of human things and build their nests, coat hangers, toys, coins, everything. Um, so it is interesting. They don't understand that it's man-made. They just find it useful, which is good because it eventually is not useful to us and we discard it. So it's good that they can recycle it and use it as long as they don't try to ingest it, because that also is not good. Um, but yeah, that was a cool observation.
And speaking of nests, we could segue into, if everybody look back here, this little poster, Diane is going to be giving a creative nest building workshop Monday, February 16th, 3 to 6 p.m. in BB 114, or we might go into BB 109. Learn how to use foraged and recycled materials to build your own personal nest sculpture. And if you want to participate in this, you can tell your professor, and then they can tell me your name. So, or you could just come and tell me, and I'll leave a space for you. Diane, do you want to talk about that at all, since we're on the subject?
No, I'm just kidding. I have a bunch of stuff gathered, man-made, and I'm going to forage some leaves. But if anyone's coming and you find anything in nature, sticks are good. So I don't have sticks. I just have palm stuff. Bring your own stuff. And I'd like each person to bring a personal item that you can incorporate in your nest as a metaphor, as you're building your own inner self as well as a structure. So it should be interesting. And it's basically, you're just going to experiment with materials and see what foraged items can do and what you can attach to these other things to build whatever kind of structure you feel at the moment.
And I'm sure your professor would be giving you a lot of extra credit. Hint, hint. If you participate in this, I think it's going to be great. Now, after this is okay. So after this, we have a reception for Diane in the art gallery immediately after, and you could have a chance to talk to her as well. Can we have a round of applause for our visiting artists? Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Diane. My students, we want to go to the design lab for a little bit, and then we're going to come back, okay? All right. Thank you, Diane.